Hello, Renegade marketers. If this is your first time, welcome. And if you're a regular listener, welcome back. You're about to hear a recording from CMO Huddles Studio, our live show featuring the flocking awesome marketing leaders of CMO Huddles, a community that's always sharing, caring, and daring each other to greatness. The marketing leaders of this episode are Joe Cohen, Sara Larsen, and Carlos Carvajal, and we explore some flocking awesome positioning stories. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. You'll be supporting our quest to be the #1 B2B marketing podcast. All right, let's dive in. Welcome to CMO Huddle Studio, the live streaming show dedicated to inspiring B2B greatness. I'm your host, Drew Neisser, live from my home studio in New York City. Positioning is one of those super squishy words in marketing. It's hard to define, it's hard to explain to non marketers, but it's inherently clear when done right. I'm going to go a place that you might not expect me to. I'm going to remind you of the scene in the first Star Wars when Obi-Wan Kenobi waves his hands at two Imperial stormtroopers and says, "These are not the droids you're looking for." And then those folks just let the wizard and the R2D2 and C3PO just pass right through. He was repositioning those droids in the minds of the troopers. Marketers essentially need to do this Jedi mind trick to capture mind space for their brands. Or as my friend Tamara McClary put it, positioning is finding the parking space, the right parking space inside the consumer's mind and going for it before someone else gets there. Okay, you got that, young Jedi? Cool. With that, let's bring on Joe Cohen, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer of Access, an unknown Star Wars fan, but returning guest who previously appeared on the show to discuss brand values. Hello, Joe. How are you and where are you this fine day?
Hey, Drew, thank you for having me back on the show. It looks like I'm in a boardroom, but this is a facade. Behind me is a poorly made bed, and I am in my home in Hoboken, New Jersey. And I'm a Star Wars fan. Grew up
All
watching
right.
the
So
original trilogy.
you know that scene I'm talking about. It's
I
just
do.
a magic sort of thing. All right, let's talk a little bit about Axis and your new energy transition syndicate. What's going on there?
Yeah, so I'll step back a moment and just let people know Axis is a global specialty insurer and reinsurer. The work we do is predominantly B2B. And part of what's our special sauce is that we're a global multi-billion-dollar company, but we're a mid-sized player. And we stand apart and compete against some of the other and bigger and smaller companies with a value proposition that centers around offering specialized insurance solutions. When you think about how we compete against the bigger players, we're able to offer more specialization, more tailored programming on a global scale, and be more nimble in doing so, which relates to what I'm going to talk about as it relates to the energy transition syndicate. And for smaller competitors, we've just got more reach and more resources and more scale and a robust global platform. To answer your question, something that has been long an area of strength for Axis is that we were one of the early entrants into the renewable energy space. But we've also had a robust energy business too, more traditional energy. So, 14 years ago, we launched our renewable energy practice a little bit ahead of the game. Now, what's been happening on a global scale is there's increasing investment in energy transition. So part of what we wanted to do from a business standpoint and from a marketing standpoint was lean into the credibility and expertise we have and put a stake in the ground. From an operational standpoint, we launched the first ever syndicate at Lloyd's, the famous business and platform, the Lloyd's of London. We launched the first ever dedicated syndicate to basically ensuring energy transition risks. And if you think about what that means, you think about whatever a project could be. It could be building a solar farm. It could be battery storage, wind turbines, and so on. And there's the conception and invention, the insurance that goes with that. There's securing financing. There's sourcing and moving goods and materials. There's the construction. There's the operations. There's the dismantling and repurposing of both before you build the new technology and updating the technology. So all of those different sorts of operational items have risks, and there's insurance need. So for us, what we created with the syndicate was a one-stop shop. So if you have any energy transition needs, we have expertise in it. We'll help you through that journey. We'll come up with customized risk solutions for you. So for this, what we want to do was celebrate the launch of it and also tie it to who we are and what we stand for. No Jedi mind tricks. It's who we are.
Okay, so there was a lot going on there and a lot to unpack. So interesting. I mean, visually, what I thought of as you did it is I remember seeing. I think it was in The Economist. It was a giant, wind farm, but two of them had been broken in half as a result of like a hurricane. Obviously, that's the kind of risk that most of us think about. But you described a much deeper and broader frame as the world tries to electrify and move off of organic, if you will, or fossil fuels, right? So part of this is a product thing, which is this syndicate and all the ways you do it. The product can be the message. And I think that's what you're saying here is that by having this, you're sort of making a stake that you are a company that is sort of on the leading edge of energy transformation, right? I mean, there's hopefully a good halo for you.
Yeah. No, you hit a lot of points there. I think part of it also is helping contextualize the different considerations that you need to have when you enter this space. And there's different drivers that is moving business to pursue energy transition. Part of it is federal subsidies in the states, favorable environment outside the states and other jurisdictions wherever a company is based or doing business. Part of it is a need and a business opportunity, customer demand, whatever it may be. But for folks who are relatively new to the space, they may not understand the full scope of risks that they're taking on. And there's a lot to it. So part of what we did, a key part of our promotional push and our marketing push was we commissioned a global energy resilience report where we surveyed 600 experts, energy producers, brokers, industrial energy buyers, and identified some of the different themes and trends that people need to be thinking about. And that gave us great content for marketing, great content for digital, social media. Obviously, earned and PR was part of it too, as well as giving our underwriters who are out in the market representing our brand something to speak about in meetings, something to speak about at events. That was one of the key tactics that helped further contextualize the message here.
Well, and that research really gives you authority, right? Because
For
you've
sure.
gone deep. It's so interesting. It's like in B2B, when in doubt, do some really good market research that enables you to sort of, and in some ways, it positioned you as experts in the category and as I said, authorities. I want to sort of make sure we answer the question about positioning because this show is about positioning and you talked about your wide range of competitors. How do you see yourselves positioned in this energy transition space?
Yeah. So part of it is that there's a lot of players who are entering this space. So we definitely have emphasized that we've been a leader in this space for 14 years. And we've got data, we've got industry knowledge, we know the ins and outs. And the other piece of it, which is very important, is as a company with a robust insurance, a global company with other products, when you're thinking about how does energy transition tie to finance? And we have a financial part of our business, insurance arm. How does it tie into construction? How does it tie into aviation, marine? Yeah, really runs the gamut. That whole idea of the one-stop shop, making it clear that whatever the subsector is, we can help you connect the dots and look at it holistically. And from a positioning standpoint, always going back to what's our core message, that we're a specialist that will help customize, the solutions we put forward for your business with the underlying message that we know this space. We've been doing it a long time.
Right, which in some ways, because you've been doing it a long time, enables you to make your promise of being specialist true, as does the research that backs it up, right? And so these pieces come together, and it sounds like you're well positioned for success in a category that is potentially exploding, but has all sorts of barriers. And just when you're talking about like, was the research, did it help you get the exposure that you were looking for? Or how have you been able to see your positioning in the minds of your prospects sort of grow?
Yeah, no, it has been helpful. I mean, we are relatively early in the campaign, so there's still a lot more to go and a lot of mileage to get out of it. But what we've, as far as getting in front of the experts, as well as the broader populace or people who are relatively new and customers who are relatively new to this, what's been helpful with the research is we've been able to reach both audiences by helping people understand things they don't know or going a little bit deeper than they may be thinking. An example that I touched on before, securing financing, something that came through in the research that people may have known or may not have known, but there were different details to unpack, is that even though we've got this explosion of growth in energy transition, securing financing has become very challenging and very costly. As you go about that, you really want a partner who understands the space. So that was just one example. And you could deliver that message in a very high level way for the newer customers, but also get into get into all the different subtopics and go in a little bit more of a deeper way with people who really know the space.
Right. Well, this is important work. As someone, I've been on the board of the Urban Green Council for
Mm.
10 plus years, and it is financing is a big deal, and insurance is a big part of it. Anyway, all right, we'll come back to you, Joe, on that. But now let's bring on Sara Larsen, VP of Marketing of Wolters Kluwer Health. So we're going from insurance to health. And as an industry expert who's graced our stage before to delve into the topic of sales enablement and CMO job search. Hello, Sara. Wonderful to
Hello,
see you again.
Drew. Thanks for having me back.
How are you and where are you this fine day?
Well, I am in the greater Boston area today, having a great summer. However, I have to warn you, I might be a little unplugged today. I'm about 30 hours away from vacation. So getting ready to head north and hang out on the lake for a while.
I am envious. You're a good month ahead of my big vacation. Okay, let's talk about how you've worked to evolve the Wolters Kluwer Health brand. It's interesting because it is a sub brand. So you've done a lot of positioning work. Let's dive into the why and why your why has evolved over time.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's a really interesting story. Let me tell you a little bit about our brands and our solutions first. So
Sure.
my focus within Wolters Kluwer Health is in the clinical effectiveness space. And those are the solutions that really support a consistent clinical decision-making process and care management across your patient or member journey. So that sounds very fancy. What that really means is a doctor in Kansas is going to have the same type of diagnosis and recommended treatment path and medication path as someone, say, in New York. So it's really a way to make sure patients get the best possible outcomes from healthcare. And it's a great way to help bring equity into the healthcare system. And so these solutions within our portfolio cover the categories of clinical decision support, drug reference, and patient engagement. Our key solution is UpToDate. UpToDate is the market leader in providing clinical decision support. It's a very content-rich application that's trusted by over 2 million clinicians. And I say trusted, not used, because it is trusted. It is the go-to source for doctors. If you went to your doctor today and asked them if they used UpToDate, they would say, yes, I love UpToDate. And what it does is, as they search it, and we have millions of searches a year, it helps doctors really have kind of that expert clinician on their shoulder, helping them make sure they're making the right decision. We always think doctors know everything, and they do, but they always want to be sure. And so this solution helps them do that. It's used very widely across the healthcare ecosystem. We've actually had independent studies, over 100 independent studies, showing positive patient outcomes based on changed decisions as a result of using UpToDate. So that's our key solution. We have around that a couple of additional solutions. We have a drug reference solution and a patient engagement solution. We bring those solutions to market to really help large hospital systems and hospital systems overall manage the patient journey. And so as we have looked at that go-to-market and as we've seen kind of the impact of the UpToDate brand, there's always been this question of how do we leverage the UpToDate brand across our other solutions, across our drug reference and our patient engagement space. And so it kind of came down to, and you asked it earlier, is when is the right time to do it? And really for what benefit for us and what benefit for the customers. So as I started looking at this question, which had been asked for many years around the UpToDate brand, we really analyzed a couple of signals. First was our business and our product strategy. Where are we taking our product into market? And what was that going to mean for our customers? One of the things we spent a lot of time investing in is something we call harmonization. And it's making sure that the information in one product matches the others so that you have a fully consistent way you're defining things, defining potential treatments, defining drug recommendations. So, what that means is if you go to your doctor, your pharmacist is looking up the same information, and your care follow up team's looking up the same information. As a patient, we assume that's always happening, but there's a whole set of solutions behind that that can make it happen.
Right. If you
So,
have different databases supporting it
yeah,
and they're not updated automatically, then you could have different. Oh, that
that's
seems
correct. Yeah.
fascinating. Uh,
So we spent a lot of time doing that harmonization. We also listened to our customers and they said, look, we love your stuff, but can you make it easier for us to do business with? And can you help us understand how all of these pieces fit together? Not just for my individual users, the clinicians, but for my organization, my enterprise. We wanted to see that interconnectedness. And so that started to really give us the insight to the answer of when is the right time and to what benefit. We saw benefit for us because we can now use this UpToDate brand halo across all of our solutions. But we also saw the benefit for our customers because it would make it easier for us to do business with them, easier to communicate the value that our solutions are bringing. So today we have UpToDate. We have UpToDate Lexi Drug, which is our drug reference, and UpToDate Patient and Member Experience, which supports both patients as well as payers around their member experience. So it really was a process of looking at our business strategy, product strategy, and listening to customers.
and so those originally there was just the one. Now there's the three under this
Correct.
sort of.
Mhm.
It's still a Wolters Kluwer sub,
Correct. Yep,
and
it's
it's
still a
just
Wolters Kluwer sub-brand, but it really brought together
got it.
the value proposition around the categories into one up-to-date sort of power brand, which is highly recognizable in market. We have
Right.
almost, 100% aided awareness in the US.
Which is amazing. So against a
Mhm.
target audience, and I know that anybody listening or watching this will go, "Whoa, 100%
Right.
against the target. That's incredible." So so basically what you're saying is you like, and if you like this peanut butter, we're now going to have the chunky version of it, or
Yeah.
or we're going to do it actually
Right.
a frozen version of it. So
Mhm.
you're leveraging a strong brand, a strong relationship into other categories.
And I go back to that brand pillar of trust. I talked about trust, and we really do talk about that clinicians can trust up to date. We wanted to make sure that same level of trust existed with any solution we would put in and around the up to date brand.
Right.
So that was really the rigorous test we had to go through because you can slap a brand name on anything, but
Right.
people have to trust it, right? And in the healthcare space, it becomes even more important because we're talking about lives.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And so you essentially had to upgrade the other products in order to be able to deliver a similar kind of customer experience, is what you're saying,
Yeah. Mhm,
which makes a lot of sense. And I wish more brands did that.
mhm, mhm.
Right? Because where you started this exercise was really how do we help the customer? And then as a
Mhm,
result of that, obviously it's going to help the business. But so often it goes the other way around. How do we sell more to our customers?
mhm, mhm. And
Uh,
and there was a lot of internal, I guess I could even say friction. There was a lot of internal friction. Obviously, for the brands that were losing their legacy names, they really wanted to understand what was going to happen to how people perceive them and how will they be perceived now under up to date. And the up to date team, which has built a blockbuster product over the past 30 years, they really had to trust that the new products coming under the brand were having that same level of quality,
Interesting.
same level of acceptance with customers. So there's a lot of internal change discussion. Our teams that staff around those projects are some of the best physicians and doctors in their field. So this is a highly engaged, highly academic audience to have this discussion with. So it really was a very thorough evaluation.
Well, another time I'd love to talk to you about the migration strategy, but we need to get to Carlos, who's been waiting patiently. Carlos Carvajal, who is the CMO of Q2, who has previously joined us on the show to shed light on the intricacies of sales enablement and analyst relations. Hello, Carlos. Welcome back.
Hey, Drew. Thanks for having me back. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's great to see you. So, how are you and where are you this fine day?
I am doing great. I just got back from vacation recently. Unlike Sarah, I'm a little jealous. I'd like to take another one. And I am in Austin, Texas.
All right. Well, so you heard Joe and Sarah, and I'm curious what the positioning work or where you would come at this in relative to what you just heard.
Yeah, it's actually, there are a lot of similarities. And you're asking kind of the why question and similar to Sarah and Joe. I'm going to start a little bit with about Q2, just to
Sure.
understand the evolution of the brand, right? So Q2, actually, we're hitting our 20th birthday coming up this month, actually. I just realized we're in August. This year is flying by the way. 20 years in the business. And we started off around online banking. So we sell digital banking software to banks, credit unions, fintechs, and even in some cases brands. The evolution over time is started off in online, then just like probably everybody that's listening today and participating on this, mobile banking became huge. Everybody does banking on their phones. And then the brand was very strong. We're a leader in the space around online banking and online banking, particularly in retail, for many, many years. Probably about 8-ish years ago, we started an acquisition strategy to expand our portfolio into commercial banking. And it may not be well known, but commercial banking is where most banks actually make their money. That's a lot of their growth strategy actually driven on the commercial and the business banking side. So the challenge from a brand perspective is we were so well known on the online banking, on the retail banking side, that we weren't viewed as a player, even with the acquisitions and other things that we made as in technology investments. So there were situations as far as like business need and challenge and the why, we would go into a deal and we may end up losing it to a competitor and they say, well, we know you're doing some things in commercial, but you're not really a serious commercial player, right? Like some of these other competitors that are out there. That was really the mission is we have incredible solutions that really solve the core, most important problems that these banks have in the commercial space. We acquired an incredible portfolio. We had very successful customers, and that was really the mission, was to evolve the brand beyond being well known in the retail and online banking space to really more of an end-to-end digital banking solution provider that could cover all the needs from retail to micro businesses to small businesses, all the way up to commercial and large corporate clients, right? And I'll pause.
Yeah, yeah. So it's fascinating because, you were positioned, one could argue, really, really well in retail, and you
Yes.
own some mind space there, right?
Yes.
And suddenly you say, I know you love us in retail and I know you respect us in, but we also got this, right? There's a lot of risks in this, in that you could dilute your positioning with the
Oh, yeah.
retail. The brand simply can't stretch and doesn't have the elasticity to get there. And so I'm curious, the building blocks that it takes in your mind to get to this broader understanding and appreciation of Q2 as a full service digital banking solution, as opposed to we got you covered in retail.
Yeah. Honestly, quite frankly, that was a challenge over time. Like we
Right.
put so much into it on the commercial side that really it was making sure we don't underinvest on the retail side. And we had so much success, and I can talk more about some of the things that we did on the commercial side, that we actually had some people come back within the company is like, we love what we've done on the commercial side. Now do more of that in retail as well, which was an interesting observation because 2 years ago it was the exact opposite, right? So frankly, as far as that transition, it's just making sure you don't lose sight, still telling your customer stories, your core message, the brand, even on the retail side. For us, it's also very important to work with the industry analysts, to work with the industry consultants, the influencers in the market, making sure that's where you can run into a problem. If the organizations that are influencing your customers think that you're exiting a market and you're de-emphasizing, and they start telling their clients, yeah, I'm not sure what Q2 is doing here, then that can create a problem. So we made it a point to the analysts and the influencers, like, we are expanding, we have grown, we've been a very successful company. So we are not exiting, we are not de-investing in retail. What we're doing is augmenting.
Right. That's so fascinating. And I think there's you know, in this tip, acquisitions often do this to companies. They get very excited about the new offering because that feels like growth, and they forget about the existing one. And that's where all your credibility and trust has been built. So we're talking about, how do you maintain the trust? And so suddenly you're in portfolio management territory, right? It becomes a resource issue, it becomes a strategy issue. And you have to sort of now expand Q2 from an overall standpoint, right? We've got Q2 and then we've got retail and we've got commercial, or we've just got Q2 full banking, right?
Yes.
And I'm
That's correct.
curious how you manage that migration.
Yeah, I think the first step was just being successful. We did have commercial technology in-house organically built, and then we expanded beyond that through the acquisitions. But kind of the first step in the evolution was to just be a credible player and a leader in commercial banking, like from the commercial banking clients, and then expanding that into what we call the single platform message, to your point, which is more of that end-to-end story. So on the first, just on the brand evolution on the commercial side, I'm a big believer, you got to start in what matters most to your customers, right? And for the commercial clients is they need to first win more commercial clients, and they're all about how winning one large business has huge impacts on a bank. I mean, they can get hundreds of millions of dollars in deposits that can then help fuel other things and more. So we wanted to connect back to the things that matter most. One, I need to win more clients. Two, I need to grow profitable relationships. And we have unique strengths through technology we built in-house, as well as some of the acquisitions, that we were uniquely positioned to help both on the credit side, which is on the lending side, to help them really price loans effectively and get a competitive edge through some technology that we acquired. But also on the flip side, once you actually got them in, how do you actually expand those? How do you get the deposit accounts and much more, and get fee-based income and grow once again profitable relationships? And we had a unique opportunity that we could actually cover both the credit and the deposit side, which was really nice. So that was a lot of the focus, is like, how do we get that message out there that we can actually help you acquire and grow profitable relationships uniquely? And then beyond that, you mentioned portfolio, and I just want to touch on this because this was a challenge as well. We had a lot of technology, a lot of products, a very large portfolio that was built over time through acquisitions and organic. So in essence, what we did, which helped a ton, is we simplified all of it down to a framework. How can you help win, onboard, serve, and grow, right? And without getting in all the details, then we kind of built a map, like a journey for our customers. What ended up working really well is basically a message of, we're going to meet you where you're at. Like, your priority may be you really struggle to onboard clients efficiently. We can help you with that today, and then we can help you grow over time and help you build that strategy to help you grow these profitable relationships. Different customers may say, you know what, we're losing on the lending side. We need help on the pricing. So we're going to meet you where you're at through this journey, and then we're going to evolve with you as your needs adapt, resonated really well.
Interesting. And so one might argue that's a rather broad positioning. On the other hand, you're essentially saying we'll partner with you,
Yes.
right? And we're not, yes, we have a wide range of solutions, but what we really care at is where you are today. I'm just curious, how did that, how does you get that positioning? Because this is a folks that really hadn't done business with you necessarily. How do you get that in front of people?
Some of the things that you talked about earlier about market research and figuring out who to work with. So we put a lot of effort into the industry analysts, and we actually engaged industry consultants on the messaging and positioning, and went through a very long process with them to validate, test. And they were pretty brutal on, like, you think that's unique, but it's not. Or one of the other ones that I loved is like, stop talking about yourselves and really lead with your customers, those kind of things. So we went through a process first on the positioning to validate with the industry experts that were ex-bankers. And then once we did that, it was just meet the bankers where they're at. One very important thing to keep in mind for us is we have a very finite target market. Like, our sweet spot is about 2,000 accounts. So I've been at companies where it was 300,000 plus, but here it's like, you can identify exactly who you're going after, and then how do you meet them where they're at? So whether it's through digital channels, whether, the PR strategies, earned media, but even good old events, road shows, all those kind of things come into play, because it's a very high touch relationship driven business.
When we were here before, we talked about your stadium. Are you still doing that in Austin?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
and
Q2 Stadium.
yeah, does that play any role in all of this? Because it's kind of cool to be able to say, hey, one of these prospects,
Yes.
say, come, let's go meet at the stadium.
So what's interesting about that, and it's another part of the brand evolution strategy, when you think about commercial, what that also does for us is it allows us to go up market, like go up to larger banks. And when you're dealing with larger banks, because we started off in the community banking space, you have to come off as a player. Like, if they're going to rely on you, right? So when you actually have them come down for an executive briefing, a larger bank, and then you say, okay, we're actually going to go host you in the stadium. And then they see all of the signage and everything, and just the presence of Q2 in the stadium, it really elevates us and makes us look like one of the larger players, right? So that actually absolutely helped, especially as we're going up market.
That's so interesting. Put your name up there and its credibility. It's like, they must be big. They must be doing something right. Look, their name is on a stadium, Oh my gosh. That's
Yeah, it's true.
amazing. All right. Well, a lot of food for thought here. We're going to come back to you and get the whole group together. But for this second, I'm going to talk about CMO Huddles. We launched that in 2020. It's a close-knit community of over 350 highly effective B2B marketing leaders who share, care, and dare each other to greatness. We used to be just virtual, but we have a super huddle coming up on November 8th in Palo Alto. Super excited about that because it's the first time the community is of 100 of us will be getting together. Given the extraordinary time constraints on CMOs these days, everything about CMO Huddles is designed to help leaders save time and empower them to make faster, better decisions. Joe, Sarah, Carlos, you've been huddlers for a while. If you feel like sharing an example of how huddles might have saved you time or something, let me know.
Yeah, I mean, Drew, I'll jump in. I'll speak a little bit more broadly. I think just being able to tap into the network, being able to speak with other CMOs. Oftentimes, you've connected me to CMOs when I've had specific challenges, has saved an enormous amount of time. Being able to pick your brain without pandering, hopefully, trying to get you to ask me easier questions during this interview. Being able to pick your brain has been helpful. And the e-blast that we get with a list of tips and insights for the huddles that we're not able to attend. There's some really good meaty insights in those. So always that CMO Huddles is helpful.
I love it. Thank you so much for that, Joe. Sarah, anything?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. One, you provide great therapy, good therapy to get with other colleagues, can talk about the gory details and things that you can't share with your team, you're not going to share with your boss. So it's nice to have that. And I would say you guys keep me current, right? Sometimes I get heads down and I don't think about topics. And so there are topics I haven't even thought that I should be thinking about, and you bring them forward. So I appreciate being on the leading edge of info.
I love that. I appreciate that. And you,
Yeah.
go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, I just love the diversity of the topics. You hit so many different areas with useful feedback and just peer insights, which is fantastic. From retention to demand gen to PR to AR to talent. I mean, it's just so many different areas, right? And it's endless, which I think is fantastic. And then just frankly, some of the huddle calls, just some very, very good, useful tips. I still to this day, I have an initiative that's been running now 3 years that came from CMO Huddles from a huddler. And I took the idea, I'm just going to be totally honest about it, right? And it was an initiative around be the best marketing team, right? And making that more of a program focused on people and around, because it's really easy to get caught up in the business KPIs and roles and everything out, but mental health, how are people doing? How are people growing? How are people learning? And somebody just shared their insights on how they were running this Be the Best Marketing Team initiatives and really did it organically, making sure leadership and marketing wasn't driving it. And it was actually happening more from the ground up, right? And that was literally something that came straight from CMO Huddle that still exists today. I got an email on this yesterday.
I love it. Okay. I want to come back to that one too. Well, if you're a B2B CMO who can share, care, and dare with the best of us and need a shortcut to B2B greatness, take a second to sign up for a free starter program at cmohuddles.com. And also do be sure to check out our super huddle coming up in November. Anyway, let's all come back together. And Sarah, we started to get at this a little bit, but where you're in this challenging situation because you can see the positioning, you've done all your homework. I know, Carlos, you hired a bunch of outside folks, but you can get resistance internally. Just curious, we don't have to be specific, but how do you navigate that resistance? Because, positioning is not something necessarily you do by committee, although you end up having to talk a lot of people about it.
Yeah, one of the things that we did is we prioritized investing in change management. And I know we talk a lot about change management, how do you actually really do it? And so we really got specific about making sure that our executive team was bought in, making sure that that was cascading into their teams, finding the champions for the program, training and educating them, and understanding where the pockets of resistance were, why that was happening, and what we needed to do to overcome. A lot of the resistance was really coming around that trust around the product. So we spent a lot of time looking at that. We did not have customer resistance. We did not have market resistance. The analysts thought this was like a slam dunk. Why didn't you do it sooner? But internally, it was really where we had to spend time. We invested in the ProSci methodology. We had a dedicated change management program. And then we measured. I did pulse checks along the way to make sure people are getting information, that they understood the why. Why is this happening? Why is this happening now? And what's in it for me? We just wrapped one of our post-launch surveys a few weeks ago. 94% of our employees said they understood why we were doing this. They understood the customer benefits. 95% said I had the timely information, and 93% said they felt prepared for change. So those numbers kind of made me smile a little bit, saying, okay, it was worth it to go through the investment in change management. But that was probably our biggest challenge in the program.
And I so appreciate you sharing the data with us and so forth. And it's just a reminder, positioning, while you can get that right, resistance to change inside is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal, particularly when you're changing a name or you're changing your go-to-market or you're repositioning against a new target. But I also love the fact that you measured the so forth. You also mentioned the executive team, getting them to buy in, and then sort of the champions and training the trainers. There were a lot of good things to unpack when you're doing these things. The internal audience can be, or more important.
For your brand, your employees are your brand. If they don't understand it, the market's not going to understand it. So you got to get that right.
Joe, Carlos, you want to weigh in on that, sort of this internal situation and getting everybody on board?
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge point. I couldn't agree more. And I know in the pre-call, we spoke a little bit about how you sustain something after a launch, and consistency is one. Another big item is consistency internally and educating internally and mobilizing people and addressing challenges and issues head on. But with the campaign I mentioned, the syndicate, we had a ton of internal communications, and the consistency part of it, it's not a one-off, providing people with updates. How's the launch going? What are some of the actions that we're taking? And stepping back more broadly as it relates to positioning, there's the broader campaign. Within Axis, I emphasized it's about specialty solutions. And there could always be the risk that internally it could feel old and boring to talk about the same messages again and again and again. But externally, our customers, they may need to hear it multiple times, particularly new customers or customers who we're growing with. So it's something where you need that repetition internally, you need it externally, and you need to remind and motivate and inspire your people to continually tell the story while arming them with fresh ways to tell the story.
Right. I love this. And I say this a fair amount in huddles, but one of our huddlers, Heidi Bullock from Telium, said internal messaging 7 times 7 ways. And so I really appreciate no one-offs when it comes to internal, but it probably applies as well. You're aware of it, but they're not. And so I'm going back to Sara, what you said about getting to 94 and 95%. I'm imagining there were a lot of touch points involved in that.
There were, and it's about the key thing were the champions. These were not the senior level of folks in the organization. They might have been, more junior in terms of where they're reporting, but they understood the why now, and what's in it for me. And they helped their peers understand it. So I think investing in that program was highly beneficial. You can send all kinds of emails, all kinds of videos, have all kinds of meetings, but you have to have that personal trust and relationship to help drive some change. And those champions were extremely helpful for us.
I think part of a program like that is that it's two-way. And you could do programs like that. You could do it on a broad scale, like Ask Me Anything town halls, but you don't want it to be you talking at your employees. You want it to be a two-way dialogue where you're basically finding out what's on their mind, addressing questions and challenges head on, but also gaining insights. And the information that you glean from those conversations and dialogues on a big or a small scale, showing later how you put those insights to use. That's part of how you really build stronger relationships and win the trust, which is a word we've spoken about multiple times, win the trust with your critical internal stakeholders.
All great points. I was going to mention the champions point too, because a lot of times you get the executive buy-in, but I could not agree with Sara more. It's really understanding who internally actually influences down at every level of the company. I think that's really key. And then to Joe's point around consistency and even thinking about cadence, celebrating the wins, like the impact, even if they're smaller wins, but just getting that out there, like, and having others share that. So it's not always coming from marketing. So getting people in sales and others say, hey, we actually tried this. This worked great. This positioning actually worked in this situation. I remember one of the things we created, they called it the money slide with that life cycle positioning, because the customers would say, I need that. And they would point to something in the broader framework. And that actually started going through sales is like the money slide. The money slide is just one example, but it was in the broader positioning around what I talked about in commercial, but just celebrating those wins along the way.
So while you're here, I'm interested because you mentioned a lot about analysts and experts. Talk about the role, and we've now talked about employee input and also education. Consumer feedback plays in shaping this positioning. How do you make sure that you're not? It's funny, I'm listening to Dan Ariely's book on misbelief, and we all have sort of built-in biases, right? And so how do you make sure that you're hearing what they're saying, not what you want to hear?
Yeah, that's a great point. We did a lot of primary research with customers and getting that type of feedback and making sure we didn't have happy ears, for example. And just starting with the core problem, like, is this the biggest problem as we think it is, or are we just hoping it's a problem, right? And that was very reaffirming. What's interesting in the commercial banking space is that this is tricky. Somebody mentioned change management. They've been following a similar process forever, which is very relationship. We're going to take them to dinner. We're going to go to golf. We're going to go do these things. So thinking about how to use technology and digital and those kind of things to really create a competitive advantage is tricky, right? From a change perspective. But through the customer research, they were recognizing, like, for the next 3, 5, 10 years, we can't keep doing business the way we've always done it, or we're going to get left behind. And they were telling us that. So it's part of that process that really helped as far as just through the validation and learning to help shape the position.
Okay, speaking of borrowing ideas, I'm gonna borrow happy ears. I just love that notion. And so again, the term is confirmation bias. We all have it in so many different ways. It feels like it's something that goes with marketing. It's a wonderful thing because it can help you build a case. It's also just it can blind you to the real opportunities there. Okay, so we've talked about aligning employees, getting customer feedback, and making sure that when we're doing this positioning work that we really understand it. Sara, you touched on measurement. I'm curious, Carlos or Joe, as you're looking at the success of your positioning, other than revenue, because obviously in your case, Carlos, we could just say, how many banks are now using you for both, or for commercial, right? Because we could just look at it that way, but there's got to be some other measurements to say that what you're doing is working.
Yeah, as far as what's working on this positioning, and we did actually look at this. I mean, yeah, you could talk about revenue, you could talk about deals, pipeline opportunities, which we could tell on the commercial side. But even just higher up the funnel, when we do have sections of our current website, for example, that are specifically on commercial and commercial banking. So are people curious? We looked at website metrics. We also looked at like social engagement. We try to do a deeper analysis as far as who's engaging with us and are we actually hitting some of these commercial clients, those kind of things as well. We basically look at some of the traditional metrics up funnel, but put a lens as far as the type of customer, the segments within like the commercial space as an example.
So the website would be an early indication that someone was actually interested in that. I got it. Okay. And
Inbound.
Inbound that. Oh, that's a wonderful notion, isn't it? Joe, how do you measure this positioning in the renewable energy spaces is resonating?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of the fundamental approaches that you'd expect, whether it's broker surveys, anecdotal feedback, results, obviously the amount of business that we're writing, renewal business that we're keeping for business that already existed, and so on and so forth, brand perception studies. What I'd say, though, is probably the best takeaway and effective best practice that we've used is embracing the idea of shared KPIs. So not operating in a silo, huddling with distribution management and the different business leaders. HR, in some instances, for certain product launches and campaigns, have an internal element to it. And the idea, some of it could even be saying in certain areas of the business, when we've launched a certain campaign, have we seen our hiring numbers go up? That kind of thing. So just to fully explain that a little bit more. But the idea of having shared KPIs and then reporting together, when we do that, it always proves more effective. And just showing how everything really connects together. So that's shared KPIs is one item I'd emphasize.
Well, thank you, Anastasia, for the thumbs up for Joe. I appreciate that. Being like having a live audience weigh in here. I'm curious, as I was having this conversation with someone the other day about positioning. Oh, it's actually HW Smith. And we were talking about this, and I remembered that the first positioning exercise that I ever went through was to convince blank to use blank instead of blank because of blank. That was a long time ago. And I was wondering if you feel like the positioning work that you're doing now, how different and how has it evolved from what you did when you first got in your career? And I'm just wondering if this is such a fundamental exercise that what was true 3 decades ago is still what we're doing today.
I don't know. I think you're trying to date us, Drew.
I don't know. On
History.
Well, here, I think you could pick up Diary of an Ad Man by Ogilvy, and there's certain parts of it that will ring true today, and others where your mind will be blown because TV is like a new thing. But I think what I'm trying to get at with this is that the fundamental truth that it all comes down to identifying and addressing the need of the customer. That has been a constant as far as the tools and the landscape and the broader environment. All that changes, and you need to be adaptive, but you never want to lose sight of the fundamentals.
I think one thing that is new, and look, I'm a disciple of the April Dunford book around positioning, Positively Awesome. Love it. Had my team read it. The thing in that process that you really talked a lot more about beyond the basics is the context. And I think that's what's probably nuanced now is the world is so much more complicated than 30 years ago, maybe. Maybe it was complicated then. But I think that in the world of B2B, the world of technology, regardless of what industry you're in, it's noisy, it's complicated. And so you have to understand the context of your positioning, I think, a lot more than potentially you've had to think about in the past.
Well, and it also feels like, you have to be more nimble. You probably have to, and this is really tricky. It's funny. My favorite little positioning, by the way, is packaged goods. It's Gain detergent. And the position was smell as proof of clean. I saw a Gain ad on the Olympics and the woman was still smelling the thing. I mean, that's a 40 or 50-year positioning. Imagine being able to do that and just but it was a different product form. I will say it wasn't the classic detergent. Anyway, all right, we're not going backwards. We're going forwards. We haven't talked about how you could use AI, if at all, in all of these exercises, but we've done that in some other shows. So let's wrap up based on your experiences, and we'll do it in reverse order. So Carlos, you get to go first. What advice would you give to CMOs and marketing leaders about the future of brand positioning?
To be honest with you, I struggled a little bit because it relates to your last question, which is I just think even for the future, you still have to get the basics right or the fundamentals right. I think just focusing on the fundamentals, you mentioned one of the positioning frameworks. I'm still a fan of the Crossing the Chasm positioning frameworks. One of the first business books I read was the Al Reese and Jack Trout Positioning for the Battle of the Mind, those kind of just fundamental concepts. However, as far as the future, I think with AI and technology, it can help as far as accelerate some of the execution and learnings and things like that, but you still got to get the fundamentals right.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do think one of the ways that this is going to be really interesting is not using it to develop a positioning, but to use it to challenge a positioning. That's an interesting thing. Okay, Sarah, we can either talk about the future of positioning, or we can just talk about, two things that folks really need to keep in mind when they're repositioning their product or service.
Well, I'll give you 3. I would say number 1, have your CEO on board. I always say marketing hosts the brand and positioning conversations. We educate, we drive it, but ultimately your CEO is going to have to drive it through the organization and across your ELT. So have your CEO on board. Part and parcel of that is making sure that your business strategy is driving brand positioning. And that means where's your revenue going to come from in the future? Who are your customers and markets in the future? And are you positioned to win there? Because I think sometimes we get tied to the past. And finally, change management. You've heard me talk about it here, but invest in change management. Sometimes it's a, afterthought, but make it part of the core plan.
Got it. Okay, Joe, 2 or 3 things either to think about as we move forward with positionings today or tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo Carlos. Staying true to the fundamentals, that's a big one. Something we spoke about earlier. Always be listening. Sounds very Glengarry, Glenn Ross, but always be listening internally, externally to all the key stakeholders. Another one, consistency. Staying true to who you are. Don't get bored with your own messages, but adapt when you need to. And another item that relates to what Sarah shared about the context. It's such a noisy environment. Figuring out ways to get your message and your brand out in a clean, clear, memorable way, it gets harder and harder. So that's, that requires work and intentionality. I gave you 4. That was more than you wanted.
No, that's perfect. That is, it's fantastic. And I'm just thinking about all of this as we're talking, and there's so many good things that we could say. Yes, positioning is an exercise that you can go through as a marketer, but you've got to involve the organization, and you've got to involve your customers. I mean, that's the biggest story there. And the one thing I wanted to sort of end on is this. Every time you talk to a customer as a marketer, you are winning. You are winning because you're creating an opportunity to listen. You are winning because and learn. You can inform the product. You can inform your repositioning. You can, find out if they're a massive fan and advocate. So talk to your customers as often as you can, because that will help you really understand whether or not your positioning is resonating. Okay. Thank you, Joe, Sarah, Carlos. You're all amazing sports. Thank you, audience, for staying with us. To hear more conversations like this one and submit your questions while we're live, join us on the next CMO Huddles studio. We stream to my LinkedIn profile, that's Drew Neisser, every other week. Renegade Marketers Unite is written and directed by Drew Neisser. Hey, that's me. This show is produced by Melissa Caffrey, Laura Parkin, and Ishar Cuevas. The music is by the amazing Burns Twins, and the intro voiceover is Linda Cornelius. To find the transcripts of all episodes, suggest future guests, and learn more about CMO Huddles or my CMO coaching service, please visit renegademarketing.com. I'm your host, Drew Neisser. Until next time, keep those Renegade marketing caps on and strong.